That afternoon in Atlanta, sunlight shimmered through a lace curtain, spilling softly over the vintage mirror in the upstairs room of a Victorian-style house. Reflected in the old glass was the image of a young woman, adjusting a loose curl of hair fragile yet strong, trying to hide the quiet turmoil beneath her calm. Her name was Amelia Hart, 25, a piano teacher at a small private school in Midtown, who had always believed her life would unfold gently until her parents mentioned the name Nathaniel Carter. She had checked her reflection too many times that day. Each glance felt like an attempt to summon another version of herself, one brave enough to walk downstairs and meet the man her family called the future. But it was still her, the same dark curls, warm brown skin, and deep eyes where worry and curiosity intertwined, like two musical notes searching for resolution. "Sweetheart, stop touching your hair." Her mother's voice floated in, warm and soft as always. "You look lovely already." Amelia smiled faintly, still smoothing a strand by her ear. "Just making sure everything's in place, Mom." "In place?" Her mother chuckled. "No woman meeting her future husband for the first time feels in place, right?" That made Amelia look into the mirror once more. Since childhood, she had heard all kinds of stories about perfect marriages, people meeting at the right time, falling in love, marrying, and living happily ever after. But her story was different. This meeting wasn't born from love, but from an arrangement. Her parents, the Harts, were respectable, well-known people whose names carried weight in their old Buckhead community. The Carters, on the other hand, owned a chain of hotels across the country. Her mother had said it plainly. "Amelia, this marriage isn't a burden. It's an opportunity, a union between two values." It made sense, on paper, but her heart didn't listen to reason. The sound of a car engine outside broke through her thoughts, smooth, steady, assured. "They're here." Amelia peeked through the window and saw a sleek black sedan stop beneath the magnolia trees. A tall man in a charcoal grey suit stepped out, short dark hair, a posture that spoke of quiet command. She couldn't see his face clearly, only the measured way he closed the car door, unhurried, precise, like someone used to control. "Ready, darling?" her father called from downstairs. "I think so." The wooden stairs creaked under her steps, each one echoing like her heartbeat. Halfway down, she heard a new voice, deep, slightly husky, unmistakably male. "Thank you for having me, Mr. and Mrs. Hart. It's a pleasure to meet you." His voice was deeper than she expected, unshowy, but weighted enough to make the air in the living room feel still. When he turned, the late sunlight caught his eyes, grey-blue, cool as steel, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone accustomed to making big decisions. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, extending her hand. "Miss Hart." His handshake was warm, steady, and unexpectedly gentle. Just a few seconds, but Amelia knew she'd remember the feel of it for a long time. They sat in the living room, tea poured, butter cookies on the tray, the clock ticking between polite pauses. The conversation began as all arranged meetings do. Pleasantries, stories, words like family values and lasting future. But somewhere between those rehearsed lines, there were small moments where something felt different. When her father said, "We think the ceremony should be intimate," Nate nodded. "I agree." Then her father asked, "Would you like to choose the flowers for the wedding?" Nate turned to her without hesitation. "What about you, Amelia? What flowers do you like?" The question made the whole room pause. No one had ever asked her that, not at dinner, not during all the planning. She answered softly, almost whispering, "Peonies. Blush pink, with a few white roses." Nate's gaze gentled. "Then it'll be peonies and white roses." There was no reason that simple statement should have made her heart flutter, but it did, like the first note of a melody just beginning to play. The rest of the visit passed in a blur of wedding talk, dates, venues, well-meaning blessings about how you two will be a perfect match. Amelia smiled and nodded, as she'd been taught to. But now and then, when no one was looking, she caught Nate watching her, not with curiosity or judgment, but as if he was quietly trying to understand. When it was time to leave, he shook her father's hand, thanked her mother respectfully, and turned to her. "I hope this meeting was pleasant for you." "It was more pleasant than I expected," she said honestly. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his lips but softened his eyes. Same here. As his car disappeared down the tree-lined street, Amelia stood on the porch, her dress fluttering in the breeze. In 3 weeks, she would become Mrs. Carter, but what unsettled her most wasn't the wedding itself, it was that fleeting smile. Because for the first time, something about this arrangement felt unexpectedly real. 3 days later, laughter filled the Hart home as Harper Lewis, Amelia's college best friend, burst in like a gust of wind, quick, sharp, and never afraid to speak her mind. "You know," Harper said, waving dramatically as another white gown was brought out at the boutique, "I still don't understand why a smart woman like you agreed to this." Amelia sighed, adjusting the hem of the dress she was trying on. "It's not that I didn't have a choice, Harper. It's just, this choice feels easier." "Easier?" Harper arched a brow. "Or are you just afraid of choosing wrong on your own?" Amelia bit her lip, silent. Harper was right, of course. Part of her had never believed in romantic love, not after seeing so many marriages around her fall apart. To Amelia, love meant risk. But an arranged marriage, at least, had order. "Do you even know anything about him?" Harper asked as the tailor measured her waist. "He runs a hotel empire. Successful, reserved, no scandals." "That's a resume." "I meant the man." Amelia thought for a moment. "He's kinder than I expected. Speaks little but thinks carefully before he does. And is he handsome?" Amelia laughed. "I don't know if that's the word, but there's something about him that's hard to look away from." "Oh, honey, that's the definition of attraction." "No," Amelia protested, her cheeks warming. "I'm just being honest." They both laughed, but Amelia felt something stir quietly inside. For days, she'd been replaying the memory of his eyes, steady, bright, searching for something unnamed. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hope your dress shopping is going well. N." Her heart skipped. Harper leaned in instantly. "Oh my God, that's your mysterious fiancé, isn't it? How does he even know I'm here? And he texted just to ask about your dress?" "Sweetheart, that's not checking in. That's caring." Amelia laughed and typed back, "Found the perfect one. Thank you for asking." A few seconds later, his reply came, "I'm sure you look beautiful in whatever you choose." Harper gasped dramatically. "That's not duty talking. That's a man falling for you." Amelia hid her face. "You watch too many rom-coms." "No, I just read real text messages." Then came another ping. "Would you have dinner with me tonight? Somewhere quiet. 7 p.m. Amelia looked up. Harper shrugged with a grin. "If I were you, I'd say yes in 3 seconds." "Harper." "Amelia, you're about to marry this man. If he wants to talk, let him. And if there's something real between you two, at least give it a chance." Amelia drew in a slow breath. Sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up the white gown hanging nearby, glowing like a promise. She typed, "I'd like that." 3 seconds later, his reply arrived. "Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." "Comfortable," Harper repeated with a knowing smile. "He wants to see you, not the bride everyone expects." Amelia looked at herself in the mirror. This time, she didn't see the girl who kept fixing her hair 10 times over. She saw someone standing at the edge of the unknown, afraid, curious, but daring to believe that maybe this marriage could be more than an arrangement. It could be the beginning of something true. Amelia knew he would arrive early. Somehow, when she thought of Nathaniel Carter, she could picture a man who would never let anything, not even time, get ahead of him. And she was right. At 6:45 sharp, the familiar hum of his car reached her window. She pulled the curtain aside and saw him standing beside the black sedan parked in the driveway, dark jeans, a navy sweater, hands tucked into his pockets, face turned toward the trees lining the path. The Atlanta sunset bathed him in warm gold, softening his usual severity. Without the suit, without the tie, Nate looked different, still refined, but closer, more human. She stood still for a long moment, her heart racing until she had to remind herself, "Breathe, Amelia." She took one last look in the mirror, a soft white dress, a blush cardigan, her hair loose, A hint of color on her lips, nothing extravagant, nothing formal, just enough to feel at ease. Comfortable, he had said. She hoped she understood what he meant. When she opened the door, Nate looked up immediately. In his grey-blue eyes, something flickered, perhaps surprise, perhaps admiration. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," he replied, his voice low and warm. "You look beautiful." She laughed softly, answering in kind. "So do you." And for a brief moment, they just stood there, no words, only the fading light and two people learning to step into each other's world. Instead of going to a fancy restaurant, Nate drove to a small place in Virginia Highland. From the outside, it was surprisingly modest, tiny wooden tables, warm yellow lights, and a scatter of hand-painted artwork along the walls. "Did you pick this?" she asked as they walked in. "I did," he said, sounding a little shy. "You said you liked quiet places." Amelia stopped mid-step, glancing at him. "You remembered?" "I remember everything." She didn't know how to respond, only smiled. They sat at a corner table. Nate ordered coffee. She asked for peach tea. Between them was a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, but waiting like a held breath before a note begins. "I don't usually do things like this," Nate said, absently turning his coffee cup. "You mean dates?" "Dates. Conversations that aren't business." He smiled faintly. "Most of my meals happen in conference rooms, with no flowers, no candles, no music, nothing but contracts." She laughed, and he looked at her as though that sound alone could calm an entire room. "What about you?" he asked. "Have you ever been in love?" The question caught her off guard. She looked down at her tea. "I think I've tried," she said softly. "But maybe I loved the idea of love more than a person." "That sounds honest." "It is. I'm tired of pretending to be strong all the time." She lifted her gaze. "What about you, Nate? Have you ever been in love?" He was silent so long she thought she'd gone too far. Then, quietly, he said, "I came close. But when my mother died, I realized I was more afraid of love than I thought." Amelia looked up, surprised. He spoke evenly, without drama. "She was the strongest woman I've ever known. She raised me independently, worked 3 jobs, and still laughed every night. Before she passed, she told me one thing: 'Don't live alone like I did, son.' I promised her, but I didn't know what not being alone meant until..." "Until what?" His eyes met hers. "Until you walked into that living room." She didn't know how to reply. Her heart pounded, but his voice was too steady, too real to sound like a line. "You always seem so certain," she said, trying to lighten the air. "I'm not," he smiled. "I'm just good at hiding it." "Hiding what?" "That I'm afraid too." "You? Afraid?" "Yes. Afraid people will see I'm not perfect. Afraid I'm not trustworthy. And strangely, tonight, sitting here, I don't feel afraid." She smiled, nervous, but warm. "Maybe because I'm not very scary." "No," he said, his tone softening. "Maybe because you're real." Dinner flowed into easy conversation, music, coffee, her dream of opening free piano classes for kids, his secret wish to have been a chef. The more they talked, the smaller the space between them felt, like 2 notes once distant, now finding harmony. When they left the restaurant, the night had grown late. Nate opened the car door for her, bowing slightly, a gesture, old-fashioned but graceful. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "No, thank you. I think it's been a long time since I felt this at ease." She tilted her head, meeting his gaze under the streetlight. "Do you always make people feel this comfortable?" "Only you," he replied. Simple words, needing nothing more. Inside Amelia, something quiet took root, delicate but undeniable. She thought the night would end with polite goodbyes. But Nate didn't drive off when the car stopped in front of her house. He looked out at the trees, then turned to her. "I know we don't have much time," he said slowly. 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks for 2 strangers to learn how to trust each other. Do you think that's possible?" He looked straight at her, and she saw her own reflection in his eyes. "I don't know, but I want to try." In that moment, Amelia realized something: the man beside her wasn't the flawless figure the magazines described. He was someone relearning to believe in people, just like she was. "You know what's funny?" she asked softly. I used to think you were intimidating. Me? You're so calm, so controlled. But now, I think, you're tired." He chuckled. "That's oddly comforting." "Not tired in a bad way," she explained. "Tired in the way someone is after carrying too much, someone who's never heard. You can rest now." Nate was silent. Then he said quietly, "Maybe you're the first person to tell me that. And maybe you're the first to ask what I want." They looked at each other, words no longer necessary. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Do you regret it? Saying yes to this marriage?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "If you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes. But not tonight." "Why not?" "Because if I have to begin a journey, I'd rather start it with someone who listens." Nate nodded, something like hope glimmering in his eyes. "I'll try to keep listening. I believe you." He leaned in, not too close, but close enough that their breaths mingled in the cool night air. "I won't let you regret believing in me." The car lights reflected off the window, glowing on Amelia's face, warm eyes, a small smile, her hand tightening her skirt. Something was shifting inside her, slowly but deeply. "Good night, Amelia." "Good night, Nate." The door closed, and he drove away. Yet even after his car disappeared at the end of the street, Amelia remained there, listening to the night wind and the steady beat of her heart. A thought rose, soft but clear. "Maybe. I'm beginning to love him." She smiled to herself, faintly enough that only she could hear it. Inside, the hallway light still glowed, and the pink peonies he'd given her were in full bloom on the table. She walked over, touched a petal gently, and whispered, "Trust me, Amelia. Don't be afraid." The words slipped out like a promise to herself. All day, Amelia couldn't focus on a single note. Her fingers pressed the keys, but every melody came out wrong, not because she'd forgotten the music, but because her mind was still somewhere back in that small cafe in Virginia Highland, where Nate Carter had looked at her as if he saw something more than a woman sitting across the table. She didn't understand why she remembered every glance, every small gesture so vividly, how he listened, tilted his head slightly when something she said intrigued him, and stayed silent without ever feeling distant. There was a quietness about him, not empty, but complete, like the lingering echo after a song ends, the kind that makes the heart tremble softly. The afternoon dragged on. She taught 2 piano lessons at school, then went home. Her mother asked her a few casual questions, but the older woman watched her long enough to notice something had changed in her daughter's eyes. "How was dinner with Mr. Carter?" she asked, smiling as she peeled an apple. "It was fine," Amelia replied, keeping her tone light. "He's polite, easy to talk to." "I've heard he's reserved," her mother said, "but thoughtful." Amelia didn't answer, only smiled. How could she explain that he remembered the most minor things she said and made her forget he was the man she'd been arranged to marry? Would her mother believe her, or think she was too easily swayed? When night fell, Amelia sat at the piano in the living room. The soft lamplight pooled over the wooden floor. She began to play the opening notes of her favorite nocturne, the one she turned to whenever her thoughts grew too loud. The melody drifted through the room, gentle and precise, like raindrops rippling across still water. Then the doorbell rang. Strange. It was nearly 8. "Mom, is someone there?" she called, but there was no answer. Her parents had likely gone upstairs. The bell rang again, quiet but patient. Amelia walked to the door, heart quickening for no reason she could name. When she opened it, she froze. Nate stood there, holding a bouquet of pink peonies, the same flowers she had mentioned during their first meeting. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd just stepped out of the rigid world he usually lived in. The soft porch light fell over him, easing the sternness of his features until all that remained was honesty and a trace of exhaustion. "You," she stammered. "You didn't call first." "I know," he said with a small smile. "I was driving home and saw your lights were still on. And I remembered you said you play piano at night." "You remembered?" "I remember everything you say," he replied quietly, and her heart stumbled. They stood there for a few seconds. She felt awkward and flustered, but she smiled anyway. "Come in before the neighbors start wondering why I'm keeping a handsome man waiting outside." He laughed softly, and stepped inside. Her mother appeared just then, apron still on, eyes bright with delight. "Oh, Mr. Carter, what a lovely surprise. Would you like some coffee or tea?" "Thank you, ma'am. Just water would be perfect, if that's all right." His easy politeness charmed her instantly. Her father soon came down from his study, shook Nate's hand, and launched into a few minutes of small talk about baseball. In less than 5 minutes, Nate had managed what few people could. He made her parents feel entirely at ease. But Amelia couldn't pull her gaze away from him. Even while he spoke to her father, his eyes found hers now and then, steady, gentle, deliberate, as if there was only one reason he had come. When her parents finally excused themselves to read upstairs, the air between them changed. It was not awkward, but it was still enough to hear the clocks ticking. "You really want to hear me play?" she asked softly, sitting at the piano. "I do," he said. "If you'll let me." She smiled shyly. "You should know, I'm not that good. I'm not here for perfection. I'm here for you." The words landed like a soft chord against her chest. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. Chopin filled the room low, tender, tinged with longing. Each note felt like a whisper, a confession told without words. Nate sat across from her, eyes never leaving her face. The light glinted against his steel-blue gaze, not cold now, but deeply intent, almost reverent. When the music faded, silence lingered. "You're beautiful, Amelia," he said quietly. She startled. "You mean the music?" "No. You." She turned away, smiling despite herself. "You're flattering me. I'm being honest. When you play, you look free." "Free?" "As if nothing in the world could scare you." Her fingers rested lightly on the keys. "Music is the only place I'm not afraid," she murmured. "I can make mistakes, lose rhythm, stop, and still be forgiven. And in life, it's not that simple." He rose and stepped closer to the piano. "I know." She looked up. "What are you afraid of, Nate?" "Not being enough. Not deserving anything good. Not knowing how to love right." "You're learning," she said gently. "So am I." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Lesson 1, don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you want me to kiss you." She exhaled, her pulse quickening. "Are you sure you want to, Mr. Carter?" "I've never been surer of anything." The world seemed to fade. He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers, a first kiss, unhurried and soft, a meeting between two people still learning how to trust. Warm, gentle, brief but enough to make time stand still. When he drew back, their foreheads touched. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" "For not knowing when to stop." "Then don't stop," she breathed. And he didn't. After that, words seemed unnecessary. Only the ticking clock and the faint scent of peonies filled the room. Amelia stayed by the piano, heart pounding so fast she thought it might echo. Nate stood beside her, quiet, watching her hands. "I shouldn't have come like this," he said, voice rough. "But you did, and I don't regret it." She smiled. "I just don't want this to be a mistake." "It isn't," he said firmly. "The mistake would have been not coming." They both laughed, soft, real. The tension broke, leaving only something gentle and new. Nate sat down beside her. "Will you play another piece? You're not afraid of sad music." "If it's you playing, I could listen all night." She chose a light jazz tune, one her grandmother used to play. It was cheerful yet tinged with nostalgia. As she played, Nate leaned back, eyes closed. He smiled each time she hit a wrong note, and she laughed along with him. "You know," she said when the last chord faded, "I've never played for anyone outside my family." "And me?" he asked. "You're the exception. I hope I'll always be one." She looked at him, and in his grey-blue eyes, she saw something she'd never dared believe in: real tenderness. Not the polite kind of grown-ups, but the kind from a man quietly bearing his heart. "I used to think this marriage was a cage," she said softly. "But maybe it's a door leading to something I never knew I wanted." "And have you found it yet?" She smiled. "Maybe I'm starting to." He touched a single key, letting one note linger in the air. "We don't have our own song yet," he said. "Maybe one day I'll write it. I want to be the first to hear it." "You'll be the only one," she replied. Nate tilted his head, as if trying to memorize her, the dark hair falling around her shoulders, the tremor of her lips after the kiss, the light in her eyes. In that moment, he knew nothing in his life would ever be the same again. "I should go," he said quietly, standing. "Tonight?" "Yes. I have an early meeting. You'll disappear into that world of numbers again, won't you?" "Maybe. But this time, I'll take the music with me." At the door, he turned back once more. "Amelia," he said. "Yes? Thank you for letting me hear something real. Thank you for listening." The door closed softly behind him. The hum of his engine faded into the distance. Amelia stayed where she was, the lamplight casting gold over the pink peonies, their petals trembling gently in the breeze. She placed a hand over her heart, still beating fast. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him by the piano, his eyes warm, his voice low. "If it's you playing, I could listen all night." She knew then some songs don't need to be written, because they already exist, recorded in the rhythm of two hearts. And that melody had begun tonight. The Atlanta night lay over the city like soft black velvet. A full moon hung high, its light glinting on the windows of the old house on Peachtree Street. Inside, Amelia Hart sat by her bedroom window, gazing at the wedding dress hanging quietly on the door. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, catching the folds of white silk until it seemed almost to glow. She had looked at that dress at least 20 times since the evening, and every time, her heart trembled for a different reason. This wasn't a fitting day, a rehearsal dinner, or a meeting with his parents. This was the night before the wedding, the night people always said no bride could sleep through. And it was true. She picked up her phone and opened their last messages. Paris weather forecast, sunny. That was like Nate. His words were always simple, factual, and yet warm beneath the surface. He never said, "I miss you," but Amelia could always read it between the lines. Once, she had thought an arranged marriage was the most frightening thing imaginable. But as the day approached, she realized what truly scared her wasn't the marriage, it was how deeply her feelings for him had grown, beyond her control. She was in love with him, truly in love, and that terrified her as much as it made her happy. The phone rang, startling her. The screen lit up. Nathaniel Carter calling. She smiled and answered, her voice trembling slightly. "You're not asleep?" His voice came through, low and rough, as if he too sat in the dark. "No, couldn't. Neither could I. I figured. Maybe because tomorrow I'm marrying a woman I can't fall asleep thinking about, afraid she might only be a dream." Amelia went quiet for a few seconds. He always had a way of making her unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Where are you?" she asked. "In that little park near our cafe. The bench under the lamppost. At this hour? It's midnight. I know. But I needed to see you, not the bride in the wedding tomorrow. Just you, Amelia. The way you were that first night I met you in your living room, no gown, no flowers, just real." She hesitated, then whispered, "Give me 20 minutes. I'll wait." When she stepped outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden. She wrapped herself in a thin cardigan and got into her car. The streets were hushed, as if holding their breath with her. She couldn't name what she felt, perhaps the stillness of someone standing on the edge of something new. At the park, the soft yellow light fell across the trees. He was there, precisely as he'd said, alone, on the worn wooden bench. His dark suit looked rumpled, his tie loosened, his posture slightly slouched, tired, but real. "You came," she said as she approached. He looked up, a weary, gentle smile on his lips. "I was starting to think you wouldn't. I was starting to think that too. But something in your voice wouldn't let me stay away." He nodded, eyes fixed on her as if afraid to blink. "I'm sorry for calling so late. It's okay. I couldn't sleep anyway." "I knew that." "You knew?" "I had a feeling. You overthink, especially when you're quiet." She laughed softly. "You read me that easily?" "Not read. Feel." Silence fell again, broken only by the hum of crickets. Then Nate spoke, his tone low and steady. "I used to think marriage was a duty, a contract. But then I met you, and everything I believed started to shift. You made me want something I never allowed myself before, hope." She looked at him. "Are you scared?" "Of course." He smiled faintly. "Afraid I'm not enough. Afraid I'll disappoint you. But what I fear most is you walking down that aisle tomorrow, still unsure if you chose right. You think I'm unsure? I don't know, he admitted quietly. I just want you to be certain, even if that means not showing up tomorrow. Amelia froze. His voice had no selfishness, only truth, spoken from love. You be willing to lose me? If that's what would make you happy, yes. The night wind lifted her hair. She saw the clearest honesty she'd ever known in his grey-blue eyes. And if I told you I've already chosen? Then I'd believe you, blindly. A small smile curved her lips. Then maybe you can stop being afraid. I'm not sure I can. Because I think I'm in love with you, and that scares me more than anything. And she whispered so softly the wind had to carry her words, I'm scared too, but not of you. What are you afraid of? Of not being brave enough to love completely. He reached out his hand, palm open, waiting. Try, he said, his voice almost a plea. She placed her hand in his, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of 2 heartbeats falling into rhythm. They sat like that for a long time, unmoving. Her hair brushed his shoulder each time the breeze stirred, and he barely dared breathe, afraid to break the moment. You know, Nate said, his voice barely above a whisper, I can't remember the last time I felt this peaceful. You haven't been before. Never. I grew up in meetings, in numbers, in expectations. My mother was the only person who ever gave me space to breathe. When she died, all I had left was work. And now, I have you. She looked up, her smile faint as moonlight. Do you ever think we're too different? No. I think that's exactly why we need each other. The trees rustled overhead. Across the park, an old angel statue glowed under a lamplight. The night felt so still that the whole city was listening. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder. She breathed in his scent wood, mint, and something she could only call him. When I walk down the aisle tomorrow, she said quietly, I want to remember this feeling. Not the lights, not the guests, just safe. I promise to keep that for you. After the wedding, after everything. You promise? I've never made a promise I didn't mean to keep. After a pause, he reached into his pocket and took out a small box, not a ring box, but a silver keychain. What's that? It used to belong to my mother. She told me, when you find someone you want to keep forever, give her this. You kept it all these years just to. Yes, he said. I think I've found who it belongs to. Amelia looked at the keychain in her palm engraved with a tiny pair of wings, simple yet beautiful. She whispered, I'll keep it. Like I'll keep our promise tonight. What promise? That no matter how life changes, we still choose each other. Not out of arrangement, not out of ease, but because we want to. I agree. They looked at each other, needing no more words. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a kiss, not like the first, but like a quiet vow. Go home, Amelia, he murmured. Tomorrow you'll be the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. But tonight, I want you to be you, the woman who made me believe in love. She smiled, a tear slipping down, not out of sadness. Good night, Mr. Carter. Good night, the woman who'll keep me sleepless for many nights. When she turned to leave, he stayed where he was, watching her until she disappeared. A strange calm settled inside him, no more fear, calculation, or faith. Back home, Amelia hung the small silver keychain beside her wedding dress. Moonlight touched them both, one symbol of the past, one of the future. Between them, she smiled and whispered to herself, Tomorrow, I choose you. Not because someone arranged it, but because my heart does. That morning, Atlanta was drenched in honey-colored light. The sky was so blue it felt impossible to worry about anything. From early dawn, the old mansion tucked within a garden in the northern part of the city was alive with people, florists, stylists, family, friends. Everything was perfect down to the smallest detail, as if the entire world were preparing for one single moment. The wedding of Amelia Hart and Nathaniel Carter. In the upstairs room, Amelia stood before the mirror. The makeup artist had just fixed her veil, and suddenly, the whole room fell still. No chatter, no footsteps, just her and the reflection staring back. The woman in the mirror wore a soft silk gown with a delicate V neckline and tiny pearls sewn across the bodice. Her wavy hair was swept into a loose bun, a few strands framing her face in the gentle light of morning. That woman Amelia looked both familiar and new. She was herself, yet different, steady, radiant, a quiet confidence glowing in her eyes. Celeste, her bridesmaid and best friend, crossed her arms, smiling. "Amelia Hart, if you don't stop his heart today, I'll be genuinely disappointed." Amelia laughed, though her voice trembled. "I'm afraid I'll mess something up." "Sweetheart," Celeste said, resting her hands on Amelia's shoulders, "you don't have to be perfect. You have to be you. Trust me, he's seen that since he first met you. You think he's nervous too." Celeste raised a brow. "If he's not nervous marrying you, he's not human." They both laughed, and just like that, Amelia's fear faded. A knock sounded at the door. Her mother entered, carrying the faint scent of jasmine perfume. "Oh, my baby," she whispered, covering her mouth, eyes glistening. "You look so beautiful." "Don't cry, Mom," Amelia said, holding her hand. "If you cry, I'll have to redo my eyeliner." They laughed together through their tears. Her father came next, adjusting his tie, his expression proud and full of emotion. He didn't say much, just looked at her for a long moment before quietly asking, "Are you happy, Amelia?" She nodded, her voice steady. "I've never been more certain of anything." He smiled softly. "Then your mother and I can stop worrying." Music began to drift from downstairs, the opening notes of the ceremony. Celeste lifted the edge of Amelia's gown and grinned. "It's time, Mrs. Almost Carter." Amelia stood at the threshold when the great doors opened, sunlight spilling into the hall. Rows of white chairs, guests silent in anticipation, and at the end of the rose-petal aisle, Nathaniel Carter. He stood tall, composed in a tailored charcoal suit, the light from the glass windows behind him setting his grey-blue eyes aglow. But what nearly stopped her wasn't his appearance, it was the look he gave her. The look of a man who had found something he once didn't believe existed. With every step she took, her heart pounded in rhythm with the faint music playing in her head. Each step was a bridge from the girl, who once feared marriage, to the woman walking toward love. Halfway down the aisle, she saw his lips move. No one else noticed, but she read the words clearly. "So beautiful." She laughed softly, bowing her head as tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes. When she reached him, her father placed her hand into Nathaniel's. The moment nearly broke her. His hand was warm, firm, closing gently over hers. "You made it," he whispered. "So did you," she replied. The officiant began to speak, his voice calm, talking of love, choice, and faith. But Amelia barely heard him. The world around them, music, rustling leaves, the faint hum of the violin blurred into quiet. Only one thing mattered: Nathaniel's eyes, steady and whole. When it was his turn to speak, Nathaniel took a breath and held the microphone. "Amelia," he began, his voice trembling ever so slightly, a rare sound for a man like him. "I won't promise you that every day will be perfect, but I promise I'll be there when you laugh, cry, doubt yourself. I'll listen, even when you can't find words, and I'll love you not because you're perfect, but because you make me want to be better." No one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Amelia took the microphone, her voice soft but clear. "I can't promise I'll always be strong," she said, "but I promise I'll always be true. I'll choose you not just today, but every day, in the smallest ways. In how I say your name when I wake up, in the coffee I make each morning, in the quiet nights we share. Because for me, loving you is choosing you, and choosing you is how I love myself." Her voice faltered at the end, and Nathaniel tightened his grip on her hand in silent reply. Then the officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Carter." Nathaniel didn't wait another second. He touched her cheek, leaned in, and kissed her. The kiss wasn't long, but it carried everything: the trust, the relief, the vow that from this moment on they would walk together. Not because of family, not because of the arrangement, but because of choice. The reception unfolded under white floral arches in the garden. The Atlanta afternoon glowed gold. The breeze carried the scent of orchids and wine. Laughter, clinking glasses, and soft jazz floated through the air. Everyone said the same thing: they're perfect together. Amelia wasn't used to being called Mrs. Carter. Each time someone said it, her heart skipped differently. She was chatting with Celeste when a familiar hand brushed her shoulder. "Nathaniel." "Sorry," he murmured, his tone gentle. "May I borrow the bride for a moment?" Celeste grinned. "Go ahead, but make sure you bring her back." He led her away from the crowd, toward the small lake behind the mansion. The sunset shimmered on the water, petals scattered like tiny boats. "Is there something you wanted to show me?" she asked. "No," he said, squeezing her hand. "I just needed to breathe." She looked at him, realizing how moved he was. The man who had always been composed was trembling slightly. "I still can't believe it," he said quietly, "that this is real. You, the woman who's awakened me for weeks, is my wife now." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "I thought I'd be afraid this morning, but when I saw you, everything disappeared. It felt like what? Like I've always known. I'd end up here just waiting for the right moment." He tightened his hold on her hand. "I think so too. Maybe we had to walk through fear, doubt, and long silences to reach this place where only truth remains. And the truth is I love you." She looked up. The sunset shimmered in his eyes like deep water. "What did you just say?" "I love you, Amelia." She laughed, tears falling at the same time. "You know, I've been waiting to hear that, but now that I do, I don't even know what to say." "Then let me repeat it until you believe it." He kissed her softly. "I love you." Again, his voice is rougher. "I love you." And she answered, trembling, "True, I love you too." In that moment, they were no longer bride and groom of a perfect wedding. They were simply two people in love, believing, daring to step into the most uncertain, yet most beautiful thing of all. When the car finally drove them away from the mansion, laughter and flower petals trailed behind. Inside, it was just the two of them, fingers entwined. Amelia looked out the window, city lights reflecting in her eyes. "You know something?" she said softly. "Today, when the minister asked, 'Do you take this man?' I didn't hear anyone's voice but one." "Which one?" "The one you said to me the first night we met." "Which was?" "Trust me." He smiled, squeezing her hand. "And you did." "He did. And I still do." The car rolled into the night, leaving behind laughter, lights, and everything that came before. Inside, amid the quiet, Nathaniel said softly, "Mrs. Carter." "Yes? Thank you for choosing me." She leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "No, thank you for teaching me to believe in love." Outside, the streetlight stretched like a trail of falling stars, and in the glow of that light, two people sat hand in hand, no longer strangers bound by arrangement, but hearts that had finally found their home. The flight from Atlanta to Paris lasted 10 hours, but to Amelia, it felt like a blink. She couldn't tell if the plane was high speed or if time moved differently whenever she looked up from her magazine and met Nathaniel's gaze. He didn't talk much, just asked quietly, "Are you okay? Or do you want more water?" But in every word was a tenderness she hadn't heard from him before the wedding. Something soft, unspoken, yet unmistakably real. When their plane landed at Charles de Gaulle, dawn had spread across the Paris sky. Golden light streaked across the aircraft's wings, and Amelia smiled without knowing why. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Nate asked, watching the view beside her. "It is," she said, "but I don't think it's just the view." He turned to her, a small smile forming. "I don't think so either." They checked into Le Pavillon, one of the Carter Group's boutique hotels. Nate had stayed there countless times for business, but this trip was different. He wasn't here as the CEO. He was here as a man on his honeymoon with the woman he loved. And that simple difference made everything feel quietly magical. Their room was on the 6th floor, with a balcony overlooking the red rooftops and the winding Seine in the distance. When Amelia opened the window, the Paris air rushed in carrying the scent of coffee, toasted bread, and lavender from a flower shop below. "We're really here," she whispered, as if afraid to break the spell. "Yes," Nate said behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Not for work, not out of duty, just because we want to be." She turned to face him, He smiled, the kind of smile she'd only seen when he wasn't Nathaniel Carter, CEO, but simply Nate, the man learning to love. They spent their first day with no plans. Amelia led him through the cobbled streets of Montmartre, where narrow alleys curved like brushstrokes on an old canvas. They stopped at a small cafe between two chestnut trees, where an accordion played softly and people laughed in the gentle French way that sounded like wind. "What do you want to try?" he asked. "A croissant and a café au lait. Classic. What about you? I just want to see you enjoy everything for the first time." She laughed, shaking her head. "You really know how to make someone blush. I'm just telling the truth." They sat under the awning, watching people pass by. Morning sunlight spilled over the streets, bright but never harsh. Children rode bicycles. A flower seller crossed with a basket of lavender. Tourists studied maps that folded and refolded in the wind. It all felt like a painting they had somehow stepped into. "I used to dream of coming to Paris," Amelia said, sipping her coffee, "but I never imagined coming with anyone. Back then, I just wanted to be alone, to be quiet. Not to be the heart daughter or the piano teacher. Just a person in a big, anonymous world. And now? Now, I don't want to be alone anymore. Why not? Because I've learned something. Some places are only lovely when you have someone to see them with." He was silent momentarily before saying softly, "You know, Amelia, I've never seen Paris like this. You've been here so many times." "Yes, but I've never looked at it. I was always passing through. Today, it's different. Maybe because, for once, I'm with someone I want to remember everything with." She smiled. "Do you say things like that to your business partners?" "No," he said at once, "because no one else makes me feel this real." That afternoon, they climbed up to the top of Montmartre. The city stretched below them, old rooftops, winding lanes, faint laughter drifting on the breeze. Amelia sat on a stone bench, eyes fixed on the skyline. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. "Sometimes, but I've never seen it as clearly as I do now." "And what do you see?" "I see you." His answer made her turn, meeting his eyes. Even the wind seemed to slow around them. She smiled softly. "I think I'll write a piece about today. What will you call it? Maybe Paris belongs to us." "I like that. Would you want to hear it?" "I'll wait for as long as it takes." When dusk fell, they walked along the Seine. The bridge lights flickered on, scattering gold across the water. A street band played La Vie en Rose, and Amelia stopped, hand still in his. "I understand now," she said quietly. "Why do they call this the City of Love?" "Why? Because here, time slows down just long enough for people to realize they're happy." Nate looked at her, his voice barely above the music. "I love you." It wasn't dramatic, not a declaration or a promise, just the truth. And for the first time, Amelia didn't answer in words. She leaned in and kissed him. Under the lights of Paris, in the hum of music and laughter, they kissed as if the world had narrowed to only the two. That night, Paris glittered like a city made of gold. Back in their hotel room, the windows stood open, letting in the night air and the faint sound of someone singing on the street below. Amelia slipped off her shoes and crossed to the small piano in the corner. She brushed her fingers over the keys, pressing a few tentative notes. "Remember," she said, turning to him, "I promised to write a song for us." Leaning against the doorframe, Nate nodded. "I remember, and I'm still waiting. Maybe tonight's the night to begin." She sat down and let her hands find the keys. The first notes were soft, slow, like wind moving across the river. She didn't look at any sheet music. Every note came from feeling, from all the words she didn't need to say. Nate came closer, resting his hand on her shoulder. She could feel his warmth steady, grounding. "What will you call it?" he asked. "I'm not sure. Maybe. Trust." "Why that?" "Because everything we have, everything we've built exists because of it." He was quiet momentarily, then whispered, "Trust me. That's the line I'll carry with me for the rest of my life." She looked up at him. "Do you ever feel afraid, Nate? That this us is too beautiful to be real?" "Yes," he admitted, "but every time I look at you, I'm grateful it is real. You make me believe that sometimes good things aren't dreams. They're what happens when we dare to trust." He sat beside her. Together, They looked out at the city, the Seine glowing below, the laughter of people on the streets, the hum of Paris at night. "You know," she said, "Paris isn't just the city of love. It's the city where people start believing in what they thought didn't exist." "And what's that?" "Happiness." He took her hand gently. "If you were music, I'd listen forever. And if you were a song," she replied, smiling, "I'd never stop playing." They looked at each other, then kissed again, no hesitation, no rush. The kiss was tender, particular, and shared by two people who finally understood love, not as a test, but as truth. Later that night, while Paris slept, Amelia sat by the piano. Beside her, Nathaniel was asleep, his face calm in the moonlight. She watched him for a long time, smiling softly, then returned to the keys and added more notes. The piece she finished that night was titled, "Trust Me." It wasn't a promise, it was a memory, a moment where love began and faith became the rhythm of their hearts. Paris, the 4th day of their honeymoon. That morning, Paris glowed beneath a gentle gold sunlight. Church bells drifted faintly from afar, blending with the clinking of cups and saucers from the cafe below. Amelia sat by the hotel window, sketching new notes in her music notebook. Nathaniel stood by the counter, brewing coffee. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair slightly tousled. In that soft light, he no longer looked like the serious man from corporate meetings, but like Nate, the man she loved. "What do you think about this part?" she asked, pointing to the page. He came over, took the notebook, tilted his head, and smiled. "If you add a major chord at the end of that phrase, it'll sound brighter." She looked up, surprised. "Did you just talk about chords? I've been listening to you play for months. I've picked up a few things." She laughed, gently tapping his chest. "Careful, you're turning into the husband of an artist. I'm fine with being a lifelong audience." They both laughed, and Nathaniel leaned down to kiss her forehead softly. Everything felt still, peaceful, perfect until the phone on the table buzzed. On the screen, one name appeared. Garrett, Operations. The smile on Nathaniel's face faded. The bluish glow from the phone reflected in his eyes. "Aren't you going to answer?" Amelia asked, her voice calm but cautious. "I don't want to. It might be important." "I hope it's not." But he picked it up anyway. "Garrett, I'm in Paris." A hurried voice came through. "I know, sir, but we have a problem. The main contractor just withdrew from the New York project. We're facing a possible 3-month delay and a $2 million overrun." The room fell utterly silent. Amelia looked at Nathaniel and saw it in an instant. Nathaniel Carter, the man she loved, became Nathaniel Carter, the CEO. His eyes sharpened, his voice dropped. "How long have you known about this?" 2 days, sir. We've been trying to handle it, but we won't discuss this over the phone. Please send me all the files within the hour. I want a video meeting at 3 p.m. Paris time." "Yes, sir." When he ended the call, the light in the room seemed to change. He stood motionless, staring out the window, but his gaze was far away. "Work trouble?" Amelia asked softly. He nodded. "Crisis. The New York project, it's the Carter Group's flagship hotel. How bad is it?" "It could be awful." She stepped closer, placing her hand on his. "Then we'll fix it." He turned toward her, brow furrowing slightly. "We? Do you think I'll let you face it alone? We promised we face everything together." He exhaled a tired laugh. "I don't want your honeymoon to be an emergency meeting." "Our honeymoon," she corrected gently. "And I don't need the Eiffel Tower if you need someone beside you right now." That made him fall silent. In his grey-blue eyes, she saw something between gratitude and fear. "I keep forgetting," he said quietly. "You're not just the woman I love, you're the woman I trust." 36 hours later, rain fell softly over New York as their plane landed. The city gleamed like a mirror, reflecting 1,000 restless lights. The Carter Group headquarters loomed tall and glassy, its black facade glistening with raindrops. Nathaniel said nothing during the entire drive from the airport. His eyes stayed on the stack of documents in his hands, as though he could will the numbers to make sense. Amelia sat beside him, quiet. She didn't ask. She didn't intrude. She reached over and took his hand under the table. It was a small gesture, but enough to remind him he wasn't alone. When they entered the boardroom, The executive team was already there. Garrett, Vanessa, Marcus, all familiar faces, all tense. "Mr. Carter," Garrett began, standing. "We've compiled all the data." Nathaniel nodded. "Let's start." The screen lit up graphs, figures, projections, red warning bars. Every line felt like a blade. "Why did the contractor withdraw?" "Disagreements over the budget and imported materials," Vanessa replied. "Do we have alternatives?" "Not yet. Every other bidder's at least 20% higher. If we delay 3 months, what's the damage? Over $2 million. And we risk losing the Henson investors." Nathaniel leaned back, silent. The room held its breath. From the corner of the table, Amelia watched quietly. Then, in a pause between reports, she spoke. "I'm sorry, may I ask a question?" Every head turned. Garrett hesitated. They weren't used to the CEO's wife being present, but Nathaniel nodded. "Go ahead." Amelia pointed at the screen. "Are the delayed sections all related to premium design materials? Imported marble, Italian wood, French crystal lighting?" "Yes." Vanessa said, "Are those materials essential?" Garrett frowned. "They're in the original plan." "Approved by whom?" "Mr. Carter." All eyes turned toward Nathaniel. He raised an eyebrow, understanding where she was headed. "Keep going," he said. Amelia stood, walking toward the display. "You once told the press," she said, "this hotel should feel like home. If that's the goal, do luxury materials serve that vision? Or are we building a palace, a place people admire but never belong to?" The silence that followed was heavy. Garrett glanced at Vanessa, then slowly nodded. "She's right. Some current designs are purely decorative, not adding value to the experience." "Then reclassify everything," Amelia said clearly. "What's essential, what's important, and what's just for show? Cut the last, keep the soul, lose the excess." Nathaniel looked at her for a long time, then said quietly but firmly, "Do as she says." 2 hours later, the new plan was complete. The extravagant materials were gone, replaced by designs that felt warmer, simpler, more human. Result: almost $1 million saved. 6 weeks regained. When the meeting ended, Garrett shook Amelia's hand. "You've got real leadership instincts, Mrs. Carter." She smiled. "I only asked a few questions." He laughed. Sometimes the right question saves the whole project. When the room finally emptied, only the two of them remained. Nathaniel looked at her, the tension in his face softening. "You know," he said, voice low, 3 years of business school never taught me what your 3 minutes just did. That's because you forgot what matters most. And what's that? You're not just building hotels, you're building experiences. And experiences start with people, not materials." He stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she whispered. "We just weathered our first storm. There'll be others. But I believe, as long as we face them together, there's nothing we can't handle." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "I believe that too, Mrs. Carter." Outside, the rain had stopped. The evening light poured through the glass, washing the boardroom in gold. And there, in the heart of a city made of steel and glass, they stood side by side, 2 people, unafraid of the storm, because they'd already found their shelter in each other. It had been almost a month since Amelia and Nathaniel saved the hotel project. The media praised Carter Group's flexible leadership, investors were pleased, and the company had regained momentum. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But inside their Manhattan penthouse, that perfection had begun to make tiny, splintering sounds, the first hairline cracks in the glass. Amelia sat by the window, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Below, autumn in New York shimmered with light cars moving like rivers of stars. Across the room, Nathaniel was on another call. His voice was calm, deep, and professional, each word measured. She glanced at the clock. 10:45 p.m., the 4th call of the day. When he finally hung up, she asked softly, "Do you ever rest?" "Not done yet," he said without looking up. "They just sent the quarterly report. There are a few things I need to review, but it's almost 11. "I know." The words closed the conversation like a door shutting gently. Amelia fell silent, but her heart stirred uneasily. Paris had once been their world where he laughed, said tender things, and learned to let go. Now it felt as though everything had reset. He with his work, she with her waiting. The next day, the apartment was empty when she returned from her piano classes. A quick note sat on the table. At the office. Might be late. N. She read it, smiled faintly, though the smile never reached her eyes. That evening, he came home. The rain followed him in his shirt damp, his face drawn. She brought him a towel, her voice gentle. Go take a shower. I'll warm dinner. He nodded, setting his briefcase down. No kiss, no glance, just silence, routine. As they ate, the clinking of silverware filled the air. Amelia tried to bridge the space between them. I'm writing a new piece. I might perform it at the school's fundraiser next month. That's good, he said without looking up. You'll come, right? He paused, uncertain. I'll try, but I might be in Los Angeles for the new project. A faint, off-key note sounded inside her. Quiet but clear. She smiled softly. That's okay. I understand. But what she understood wasn't his busyness, it was the distance forming between them, inch by inch. That night, she couldn't sleep. She played Trust Me at the piano, but it sounded different now. Slower, sadder, scattered. It was as if even the keys could feel what she couldn't say. Trust also needs tending. One morning, Amelia woke to find the bed beside her empty again. Another note. Same handwriting. Same silence. She wasn't angry, just hollow. That afternoon, she decided to stop by his office, carrying a small box of croissants from his favorite Parisian-style bakery, a tiny piece of memory. When she entered Carter Group's lobby, the receptionist looked startled. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter's in a meeting. That's all right, Amelia said kindly. I'll wait. She could see him through the glass wall from the waiting area, standing tall beside the projector, his tone confident and commanding. Next to him was Vanessa, the project architect, pointing at a layout. They spoke, they exchanged notes, then both smiled. It was only a small, professional smile, but it stung. Amelia knew it was irrational. She trusted him, she did. But she was human too, and humans fear being left behind in the world of someone they love. A sound startled her, the door opening. Nathaniel stepped out, and his face lit up when he saw her. Amelia? What are you doing here? I brought you lunch, she said, holding out the box. I thought you might forget to eat. He hesitated. Thank you. But you've got another meeting, right? Yeah. Probably until late afternoon. She smiled and handed him the box. That's okay. Eat it later. I just wanted to make sure you remember. I will. He lightly brushed her shoulder quick, distracted, and returned to the meeting. She watched him go, then turned away, her footsteps echoing in the marble hall. That night, when Nathaniel came home, she was waiting by the piano. You're back, she said brightly. I want you to hear something. He smiled tiredly, loosening his tie. Right now, I'm a little. Just a few minutes. She sat at the piano, her hands trembling slightly. The melody began not sad, but quiet. It was a piece about distance, black and white keys alternating like messages sent across a widening space. When the final note faded, the room stayed silent. What do you think? She asked, eyes searching his. He hesitated, then said softly, It's beautiful, but a little sad. Because it's true. I'm tired, Amelia. Can we talk later? The words extinguished something in the air. She nodded, forcing a smile, though her fingers still rested on the keys. He went upstairs. The bedroom door closed. Amelia sat there a long time. Outside, rain began to fall. She realized love doesn't die from arguments. It dies in the spaces where silence grows too long. That night, Nathaniel woke past midnight to the faint glow of the piano lamp. She was still there, eyes closed, fingers resting on the keys, but not playing. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he whispered. She opened her eyes. Tears shimmered faintly. I don't need you to apologize, she said softly. I just need you to be here. He sat beside her, taking her hand. I didn't realize how far I drifted. I thought working hard meant protecting us. I don't need protection, she said. I need presence. Her words struck something deep inside him, and for the first time in weeks, he turned off his phone, set it aside, and whispered, "I'm here. Really here." She leaned her head on his shoulder, exhaling. Outside, the rain still fell, but inside that small room, a different quiet filled the air. The quiet of two people learning to love again, after already having loved. New York in midwinter cold, fogged, and still. Amelia stood by the window, watching the first snowflakes drift across the rooftops. The apartment was warm, but silent. The piano hadn't been played in days, as if even it were listening to the distance between two people who still shared a home but no longer shared a rhythm. Since that rainy night, Nathaniel and she still talked and ate dinner together, but their conversations had grown careful, polite, and safe. No arguments, no tension, just fatigue. One afternoon, while she was sorting her sheet music, Nathaniel's phone rang. He was in the shower. She reached to hand it to him, but the name on the screen made her pause. Vanessa Carter Group. She didn't answer, just looked, then set it down. When he came out, she said quietly, "Vanessa called." He stopped, towel in hand. "I know. She's leading the expansion project. Probably urgent. Do you talk to her often? Outside work hours?" "Sometimes," he replied. Short, honest, but still, it stung. Not because of jealousy, but because Amelia realized he was slipping back into the life he'd had before her. That evening, she left early for her piano classes. The small room smelled of varnished wood and old songs. She played "Trust Me" again, but the melody had changed. Each note carried the question she hadn't dared to ask. Can love survive if only one person is still holding on? The door opened suddenly. Nathaniel stood there, still in his dark suit, breath visible in the cold air. "Are you crazy? It's freezing, and you're not even wearing a coat." "I needed to see you," he said, voice low. "We need to talk." She closed the piano lid gently. "About Vanessa?" "No. About us." He stepped closer, but stopped midway, close enough to be near, far enough not to threaten. "Amelia, I haven't cheated on you," he said, each word deliberate. "But I've done something worse. I made you feel alone even when I was beside you." Her eyes filled, though her voice stayed calm. "How long have you known that?" "Since I noticed you looking at me without smiling. Since your music started sounding sad." A trembling laugh escaped her. "You realized early. But late enough to matter. It's not too late." He reached for her hand. "I forgot that love isn't about protection but presence. I forgot you didn't need a hero. You needed someone willing to sit quietly with you." "Nathaniel," she whispered his name like a sigh. "I never needed much, just to be seen." His fingers brushed her cheek, cold, unsteady. "I see you now, truly, but I don't see you anymore," she said softly. "You're somewhere between your meetings, glass walls, and emails. And I'm still here waiting." Silence fell. Outside, the wind swept past the window, the sound of snow tapping softly against the glass. Finally, she spoke. "I think we need time to know if we're still walking the same path, or just holding on to something that once was beautiful." He looked stricken. "You want to leave?" "No," she said gently. "I just need to find me again the woman who made you believe in love. And you need to remember why you chose me in the first place." Her words struck deep. He wanted to protest, to pull her back, but somewhere inside, he knew she was right. "I don't want to lose you." "Then don't," she said. "But sometimes, to not lose something, you have to let it breathe." She slipped her hand from his and placed the "Trust Me" sheet into his palm. "If you still believe," she whispered, "play this. When it feels like it did the first time, you'll know what to do." And then she left. The door closed behind her, leaving Nathaniel alone in the echo of falling snow and in the sound of his own heart, slow, heavy, and hollow. 2 weeks later, the apartment felt emptier than ever. Amelia had moved back to her mother's house in Brooklyn, taking only a suitcase and a few pages of music. There were no fights, no tears, only silence, the silence between two people who still love each other but need space to understand how. Nathaniel kept going to the office, but everything felt different. He no longer barked orders. buried himself in numbers. Each night, he sat before the piano she'd left behind. The Trust Me sheet waited on the stand. He had never played before, but he began to learn. Every note was clumsy, offbeat but honest. One night, Garrett walked in, startled. "Boss, are you playing the piano?" "No," Nathaniel said quietly, eyes on the keys. "I'm learning how to listen." In Brooklyn, Amelia returned to teaching. One of her students asked, "Miss Hart, why does your song Trust Me sound so sad?" She smiled faintly. "Because sometimes trusting hurts." But at dusk, she would often scroll through her phone, pausing on the photos from Paris, the two of them by the Seine, hands intertwined, faces lit with joy that didn't need words. She touched the screen and whispered, "Do you still remember, Nathaniel?" One rainy night, a knock came at her door. When she opened it, Nathaniel stood there drenched, breathless, with no umbrella, coat soaked through, and eyes clear and steady. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice trembling. "To return this," he said, holding out the sheet music she'd given him, edges worn, new notes added in. "You played it?" "I listened, and I understood." She stared at him, speechless. He stepped closer, speaking softly. "I forgot that love isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to stay, even when it hurts. And I want to stay, Amelia." Tears welled up, mingling with the rain. "Are you sure? This time, I'm not just saying, trust me. I want to learn to trust with you." He held out his hand, the same firm hand that once scared her with its control, now trembling from the fear of losing her. She placed hers in his, whispering, "Welcome home, Mr. Carter." He smiled, pulling her into his arms. Outside, the rain turned into music against the windows. That night, they sat together at the piano. Amelia played, he followed, offbeat but present. Trust Me filled the room for the first time, not perfect, but true. And in that moment, both of them understood. Love doesn't die from mistakes. It only dies when people stop being brave enough to come back. Winter slipped quietly out of New York, almost without anyone noticing. One morning, when Amelia opened the window, she saw that the snow had melted and the bare branches were budding again. The air smelled faintly of wet earth, fresh bread from the corner bakery, and sunlight that scent you only notice when spring is near. She brewed tea and poured it into the blue porcelain cup Nathaniel had bought in Paris. He was home again now. There hadn't been a grand reconciliation, no tearful declarations, just one morning, when he arrived with a bundle of dried lavender and said, "I don't want us to start over. I want us to keep going." From that day, things began to change, not through promises, but through small habits. He turned off his phone during dinner. She made his coffee each morning. They learned when to say "I'm fine" and when to say "I understand." She stopped waiting for him to be perfect, and he stopped expecting her always to smile. In the afternoons, Nathaniel often came home early. He didn't sit in his office anymore, but in the chair beside the piano reading, or simply listening to her play. Music became their language again, the bridge between two souls. One day, as she was teaching her students, Nathaniel appeared at the classroom door. "Mr. Carter," the children shouted, delighted. He smiled, bowing slightly. "I came to hear your teacher play." Amelia blinked in surprise, then smiled back. She played a short piece, cheerful, light, like the breath of spring itself. When the last note faded, the class clapped. Nathaniel did too, and in his eyes there was a warmth deeper than sunlight. That evening, walking by the Hudson River, Amelia said, "I once thought love was like a long symphony. The longer it is, the better. And now I think it's a piece without an ending. You keep playing, as long as you still want to." He looked at her, eyes gentle. "Then we'll play for life. Just don't forget to listen," she teased softly. "I wouldn't dare," he said, squeezing her hand tighter. Spring, for them, wasn't loud or dazzling. It came quietly through small laughs, simple mornings, silences that no longer hurt, through the comfort of knowing the other was there, without needing words. May. Amelia held the small concert she had long planned at her school. The hall wasn't large but warm, full of soft light and familiar faces. In the front row sat Nathaniel, wearing a white shirt and a calm smile. She stepped onto the stage, the light catching her hair like a stream of gold. "The piece I'll play tonight," she said into the microphone, was written in the middle of a cold winter, but finished on a spring morning. It's for those who once feared love, once lost faith, but chose to believe again. She sat down at the piano. The first notes rose. It was "Trust me," but different. No longer sorrowful, no longer pleading. The melody was lighter now, like breath, like sunlight slipping through a curtain. In the audience, Nathaniel couldn't take his eyes off her. Each note touched a memory, a Paris evening, a Brooklyn rain, a morning when she smiled over coffee. And he understood. This wasn't just a song. It was their story written with mistakes, tears, and faith. When the final note faded, the hall stayed silent for a heartbeat, then burst into applause. Amelia bowed slightly, then looked up at him. His eyes were wet, but peaceful. After the concert, Nathaniel walked onto the stage, holding a bouquet of pink peonies, the first flowers he had ever given her. "You still remember them?" "How could I forget? I think they're our symbol." "Because they're beautiful?" "No," he said softly. "Because they bloom again every season." She smiled, placing a hand over his heart. "You know, Nate, there were times I was afraid we'd fall apart. So was I. But now, when I look at you, I know as long as we keep choosing to believe, we'll always find each other. Anywhere, anytime." He said nothing, just pulled her close. Around them, the hall still echoed faintly with music. Outside, the May air was tender, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze. That night, they walked home together. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their world was small, just footsteps, hand in hand, tired smiles that meant peace. Back at the apartment, Amelia sat at the piano. Nathaniel stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Have you written something new?" "Yes," she said, touching the keys. "It's called Forever Begins Here. Can I hear it?" "Not just hear it." She smiled. "Play it with me." He sat beside her. She guided his hand onto the keys. At first, he missed the rhythm. She laughed softly, adjusted his fingers, and soon found the flow together. The melody was simple, gentle but full of feeling. When it ended, they stayed there, still and quiet. Outside, the city shimmered under a light mist. Inside, warm lamplight fell across two serene faces. Nathaniel spoke first, voice low. "You know, Amelia, maybe love isn't about finding someone who makes you happy forever. It's about finding someone who makes you want to try every day." She leaned her head against his shoulder and smiled. "I think we already have." A soft breeze lifted the curtain. The piano remained open, the sheet music still waiting unfinished, like their love. And somewhere in the hum of a city still awake, a voice seemed to whisper, warm, steady, tender. Love doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be true. And sometimes, truth is all we need to begin forever.